This is Mike Tamano's Wild and Free, and we welcome to the program Richard P. Smith. He is an outdoor writer, photographer, wildlife expert, and hunter. He specializes in the pursuit of black bears and white-tailed deer, and he has shared his knowledge for years, both in his writings, his photography, and his expertise and advice. Thank you, Richard, for joining us on the program.
Glad to be with you, Mike.
How do you juggle all the things that you do?
Well, it's just a matter of scheduling them to fit them in the week by week.
And you're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. What is it about the UP that makes it so magical?
Well, it's surrounded by the Great Lakes, for one thing. Lake Michigan on the south, Lake Superior on the north, Lake Huron on the east. It's a fairly undeveloped area, not many people. There's probably more white-tailed deer in the Upper Peninsula than there are residents. So there's lots of woods and fields and natural habitat, plus the Great Lakes and a lot of inland lakes and streams and rivers too. It's a great place for an outdoors person like myself.
How do you pick the subjects that you write?
Well, what I know, what I like, what I'm interested in, and topics that I know, that's what I write about.
How do you differentiate between a hunting method and a photography method?
Well, not a lot. Generally, when I'm photographing wildlife, I like to become as familiar with my subjects as possible, gain their trust, so if they smell me or see me, they're not frightened. And I've gotten to the point now, Mike, where I can walk with black bears, I can walk with whitetails, and they ignore me because they're used to my presence. So I can photograph natural behavior. I can see things that most other people never see. It's a great way to get terrific video and photographs.
A lot of times if I'm going to photograph wildlife, I'll go to forest preserves where they are used to a lot of activity, non-threatening in their area.
Exactly. And I do the same, Mike. In many of the places that I photograph, hunting isn't allowed, hunting with firearms or bow and arrow, but hunting with a camera is. Those are many of the areas where I photograph. But even where I photograph bears and deer that get used to my presence and I gain their trust, I would not hunt those areas. I hunt in different areas than where I photograph.
You've written for all the major publications in the outdoor field, and they go to you for your expertise on the black bear. What is so fascinating about this creature that draws people in?
Well, their life history is so different than most other mammals we have in North America. They're one of the few, if not the only mammal that gives birth to their young during the winter. Most mammals have their young in the spring and summer when the weather's warm and there's abundant natural food. But black bears give birth in the winter den, and because of the fat reserves that females have built up earlier in the year, they convert that fat to milk that nurses their cubs that they grow real well on. And they're capable of killing people. And some black bears do injure and kill people on an annual basis, although it isn't a very high number. They're dangerous animals, or they can be dangerous animals, and but most often they aren't. And that's what's so fascinating about them. They are capable of harming us, but most cases they choose not to.
Obviously, you spend a lot of time with biologists and wildlife experts throughout the country as you study black bears and write about them. And finally, it seems that there's a public sentiment that is agreeing with the fact that bears need to be hunted, especially in densely populated areas.
Yes. And New Jersey is a prime example. New Jersey has some of the highest bear densities in North America, and they have had two previous hunts. They had a hunt in 2003 and 2005, but they were supposed to have hunts every year for a 5-year period to help manage that population. But anti-hunters, animal rights people who do not understand the role that hunting plays, helped cancel some of those planned hunts. But they have another hunt that's supposed to go forward this fall in December to help manage that population. They've had a tremendous number of nuisance complaints, and they've had people attacked. Bears have not killed anyone in New Jersey yet, but the potential of that happening is very high.
Well, we're talking with Richard P. Smith. You can go to richardpsmith.com, find out about this fascinating man and his world of the wild. Now, Michigan is one of those states that has always had a rich tradition of fine outdoors men and women, but now it seems that there's some bureaucratic mess that goes on. Your dove hunting got banned. They're looking to ban private ranch hog hunting. Can you expound on those?
Well, the dove situation is an unfortunate thing where false information was used to sway a lot of voters, uninformed voters, about the role that hunting plays and the fact that the dove population would benefit from hunting rather than being harmed.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult to counteract false information when you don't have a lot of money behind you. And if for some reason, hunters in Michigan and the hunting organizations in Michigan were not able to raise enough money to counteract that false information that was spread by anti-hunters that wanted to ban dove hunting. And hopefully that won't happen again. We did have a similar situation with bear hunting earlier in 1996. There was an attempt to ban bear hunting with bait and dogs, which are two very good management methods to manage our bear population. And fortunately, hunters, fishermen, all outdoor people got together, raised enough money that we had a successful campaign to defeat that effort. Part of the reason that dove hunting was defeated in Michigan is that there were some hunters even who did not understand the value that hunting plays in managing doves.
Yes.
That was one of the big problems in that campaign.
Well, the hunting collective is often made up of some of the smartest people I've ever met and also some of the most ignorant. And I mean that in terms of they're not even aware of protecting their own rights.
Yes.
And they oftentimes, as Fred Bear pointed out, if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem because they don't get involved. And when they do find themselves scrambling for information, it's usually the wrong information, and they end up being our own worst enemy.
Exactly. In using the bear and the dove situations, they are complete opposites. As I mentioned earlier, black bears are capable of attacking and injuring people, and they've killed some people in the history of the state. In some people, it's easier for them to understand the importance of managing dangerous animals. Mm-hmm. But you take the dove, they don't pose a threat to people.
Right.
Some hunters aren't interested in hunting them, so they don't care that somebody else wants to hunt them. They don't pose a threat. So that puts doves on a whole different level than black bears. And a lot of hunters just ignored the issue,
mm-hmm.
Rather than getting involved like the bear hunting issue.
What's your favorite bear hunt?
My favorite bear hunt? Probably a spot and stock hunt that I did on Vancouver Island with Jim Shockey a number of years ago.
Wow.
Jim was just getting involved in the outfitting business at that time. In fact, he was still guiding at the time. He didn't have an outfitting business at the time he guided me. And Jim is a character. If you've seen his TV shows, it's just a joy to hunt with Jim. And I took a tremendous bear with bow and arrow on that spot and stock hunt. It was close to a 400-pound animal in the spring. It would have been 500 or 600 pounds in the fall, and it had a record book skull scoring over 1911 sixteenths is what the skull scored on that bear.
That's a big one. Well, you've shot bigger. Let's talk about your spring of 2002 black bear from Saskatchewan.
Yes, that's my best black bear ever. I took that bear with a muzzleloader while hunting with Brian and Shelley McDonald at Carswell Lake at their camp there. It is the number 2 black bear for North America in muzzleloading records. It was a huge adult male. The skull scored 21 14 sixteenths. And it's on Boone and Crockett records besides muzzleloading records.
How much did that weigh?
He weighed 450 in the spring, and that bear would have been in excess of 600 pounds in the fall.
And that's on display at the Cabela's in Hamburg, Pennsylvania.
That's correct.
One of your mounted black bears is a movie star. Tell us about that.
Yeah. One of the first bears I took with a bow and arrow many, many years ago when there weren't many bow hunters after black bear in the Midwest. It wasn't a very big animal, but I had a head mount done, typical of many mounts with his mouth open and in a snarl. And Jeff Daniels filmed a movie in Escanaba here in the Upper Peninsula called Escanaba into Moonlight.
Right.
And the head mount of that snarling bear was chosen as a prop in the cabin where much of that movie was filmed.
It's amazing stuff. And you, one of two people in Michigan to collect the CBM Grand Slam. Can you explain that to my listeners?
Yeah, Commemorative Bucks of Michigan is the state big game record-keeping organization, and they keep records on deer, bear, elk, which we have a huntable population here in Michigan, and turkeys. And a CBM Slam is taking one each of those species that qualifies for state records. And as you mentioned, I was the second person in the state to do that. I had taken a number of whitetails that qualify for state records, and I got an elk in 1995. I drew a bull permit and took a nice 6x6 bull. And then I got a black bear in 1999, and the only one I didn't have was a turkey. So I hunted specifically to take a long-beard turkey and was successful the following year.
That's amazing. How is it hunting elk in Michigan? They're not as prevalent as they are in the western states, and they are introduced, so it's a real controlled situation, isn't it?
Right. It's a limited entry hunt where you have to apply for a license. There's a few hundred elk licenses issued in the state every year. Most of those are for cows, but there are a few, about a third of them are for bulls. And in the northeastern Lower Peninsula, the elk population is very decent there. So if you do some scouting and plan your hunt just like you would for white-tailed deer, it's not difficult to find the animals. In fact, I passed up several 5x5s and some smaller bulls, and I missed a larger bull than the one I got. I started hunting with a muzzleloader, and I missed a huge bull that I'm sure would have been a state record at the time with my muzzleloader. Then I switched to my centerfire 30-06 and got the 6x6. So the hunters have put their time in. It's not too difficult to get one.
Right. Let's talk about aspiring photographers. What advice do you have for aspiring photographers of the wild?
Well, get to know your subjects and practice. Shoot as much as you can. The newer digital cameras are easy to use. It's just a matter of getting out in the field and trying them under different circumstances, experimenting with them. The more you use them, the better you get.
Could you recommend a semi-professional outfit for someone who's just starting? What's a good camera to buy?
Well, Canon is a good make, and so is Nikon. There are a number of good camera manufacturers out there. I've used Canons my entire career and have had excellent results with Canon cameras. The digital camera I use now is I forget the model number, but I've got two lenses for it. I've got a 70 to 200 millimeter zoom, and then a 25 to 70 zoom for wide angle and closer shots. And those lenses have worked real well for me with the digital camera, covering from close-in fishing in a boat to using the telephoto to photograph wildlife.
You've been able to write for so many magazines. You've written 24 books now. What advice do you have for aspiring outdoor writers?
Well, here again, become familiar with the magazines you want to write for. Become familiar with the types of articles they use, what time of year they use them, and any type of subject you're familiar with that they may not be covering very well. If you find an area that they haven't covered well in their publication, that's a perfect opening to query the editor on an article on that topic. Visit
richardpsmith.com and see what it's like to be a person that lives in the great outdoors and is consumed by it. I do want to end with you talking about a photograph that you have taken is unlike any other photograph, the grizzly bear attack.
Actually, it's a series of photographs.
Of photographs, yeah.
I'm the only person I know of to successfully photograph a grizzly bear attack on a person. And it wasn't something that I went out there intending to do. I was at a writers' conference in Kalispell, Montana in the 80s, and one of the members, who was a game warden for Montana, was relocating a grizzly bear to the Bob Marshall Wilderness area. So I got a chance to go along with the intent of photographing this bear as it was released from a trap and when it went back to the wild. The animal had been drugged earlier so it could be fitted with a radio collar and ear tags, but it took us so long to get to the release site, it was fully recovered from the drug by the time we got there. The warden stood on the trap, lifted the door to let the bear out, and he hollered, "Go," to the driver of the pickup truck as soon as the bear hit the ground. And the bear was angry from being in the trap so long, and he turned and tried to get at the warden, pulled the trap out of the truck with the warden on top of it, and grabbed the warden by his right leg, I believe it was. Fortunately, the warden had a .357 Magnum handgun, and he shot the bear and killed it with the sixth and last shot.
Wow.
Well, before we even got around to releasing the bear, I mentally prepared myself to continue photographing regardless of what happened. So I was focused on shoot, shoot, shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a month earlier, I had missed some key shots when moose were being relocated to the Upper Peninsula here from Ontario. A moose came out of the trap and attacked a game warden in that situation. And it caught me by surprise that I stood there with my mouth open and not shooting with my camera. Because of that incident, I programmed myself to keep shooting regardless of what happened when this grizzly bear was released. And I got a dramatic sequence of photos as a result.
Amazing stuff. RichardPSmith.com. Richard, promise you'll come back on the program soon.
That'd be great.
Keep on doing what you're doing for us. We appreciate it.
I hope to. Nice talking to you, Mike.